Hello everybody and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 291. My name is NBZ and we're just talking about it, Bally, but we're here for the funeral. We're all gathered to...
They're trying to end the podcast.
They're trying to end it. That we won't let them, but they will try. Maybe we should just end it because frankly, I don't want to go on without our good buddy, our good friend, Skype, who it was announced that they will be murdered at some point in May this year. We don't have long, about a couple of months left of Skype podcasting, and then it's over. Now, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, why the fuck are you podcasting on Skype in the year 2025? And I'll tell you what.
Ancient millennials.
We started this podcast in 2013, back when Skype was the king of the hill. This was before any pandemic, any Zoom nonsense, taking over. And Skype was a thing that everybody used. It was frequent. It was purposeful. It did its job well. And let me tell you, for the last 10, 11 years at this point, it's done its job. It's done a great job, and we've enjoyed it greatly, and it works, and there's nothing wrong with it, and Microsoft has decided they're going to kill it because they're horrible people, This is all I can say about it, so. Yeah. It's a shame. I don't know, Bally, we banding around the idea of, going hopping for different services to see which one works the best.
Feels risky to me, especially with my tech skills.
Yeah, that's true.
But we could try, because we'll eventually find something we like, and we got to use it for another 11 years. That's the aim.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we could go back and we could use Ventrilo, a classic internet, what you would call it, program, I guess. Ventrilo, the first voiceover program I ever used on the internet. Used that to talk to Magnitude, to Ferris Wheel back in the day. My good buddies, good pals in the Pokemon community.
What year are we talking? 2007?
We're talking 2008, 2009.
8, 9, yeah.
I think 2009 is when I started talking to those guys. 2008, I started uploading stuff on YouTube, but then 2009 is when I started actually voice chatting with people online, which was a weird experience, also probably not advisable as 16-year-old on the internet, but hey, I thought these people were cool. They were cool.
I think 16-year-olds are doing way worse these days.
Oh, they are. Frankly,
way
you're
worse.
right, they are, but it was a new thing talking to random people I remember that one time Ali T came around to my house and you were there as well, and he was doing a battle and he just started chatting with the guy on the voice chat on DS, and we're like, Ali T's talking to the person, because we hadn't talked to people through that stuff.
Be a murderer.
Exactly, and Ali T was just having a nice chat with this guy from the O&M forums, on this chat, and then years later, obviously, I do the YouTube stuff and I talk to these people all the time on the internet, and it leads to both yourself and my sister being very annoyed when I use Americanisms at this point, because I spent so many years talking to Americans, so it all changed. But
now you're in America so much that
exactly.
you can finally use all these Americanisms you've learned along the way.
Yeah, I'll be back there very soon. Unfortunately, not to my favorite city, LA, but to my my second favorite, San Francisco. Actually, I really do like San Francisco. I think San Francisco is a great place. So I'll be back there for GDC.
We need to do a podcast about LA versus San Francisco and why one is better than the other.
It's pretty simple. It comes down to one of them is walkable and the other one is a car hellscape, basically. That's basically what it comes down to. But yeah. Anyway, it's good stuff. I'll be doing GDC stuff, and I'll probably be doing another audio log for Patreon, so look forward to that. But let's get into the video games, Bally. Here we are on the 7th of March 2025, and we have, T-minus a month for Nintendo Switch 2 news. So I think the show after the next one will know everything, so exciting times. We are going to be in a world where things will be revealed.
Do they reveal all in that April Direct? Is there anything they keep under wraps?
I don't think so. I think they probably say everything that we need to know. And, the little idiosyncrasies that they have will probably be things that we'll figure out as previews happen, as people go to events, and then as eventually it gets released.
The mouse, the C button.
Yeah, exactly.
God knows what else.
All the unknowns will be known at some point in time, and we're very close to it. But we're not close yet. We're close to other things. And Bally, you're going to tell us what those other things are, because that's today's show.
For the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing, and for the second segment, we're going to talk through some emails.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got some good stuff to be chatting about. Let's kick it off, Bally, with a brand new video game. Not, unfortunately, on a Nintendo console, but I think likely to be on Switch 2 when it comes out. Yeah. The brand new game from Joseph Fares' studio Hazelight, the creators of Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, A Way Out, and It Takes Two. Very well known in the industry at this point for cooperative games that require two people to play together. Obviously, Brothers was a single-player game. It had a kind of cooperative mindset to it, the way it controlled. But since then, they have made exclusively two-player games that you can play with a friend online. And at this point in time, not only do you not have to be, on the same platform. Actually, yeah, but not only do you not have to have it free with the Friends Pass that they did for It Takes Two, but now they've gone cross-platform, so you can play it with someone on PS5, on Xbox PC, PS5. You can do whatever combination you like. Yeah,
you played It Takes Two on the PlayStation 4, and I played it on PlayStation 5.
Correct.
And there were some levels that were a little bit choppier for you, but this time round, I'm on Xbox Series X, and you're on PC, and it's been pretty damn smooth so far.
Yeah, so Split Fiction. I also want to give a shout out to a friend of the show, Jordan, who just had a code for it and sent it to us. And I was planning on buying this, and then Bally's like, "Wait, this code that for Xbox is for Split Fiction." So that's great. So we were able to play it.
Thank you.
And we are not very far in yet, and of course, it's only just released, so there's...
And we'll probably have much longer spoilery thoughts on our Nintendo show when we eventually beat this game, but we thought we'd jump in with just our initial impressions.
Exactly,
here.
and I think Split Fiction makes sense to talk about on this podcast because it is a very Nintendo-style game. It is a platformer at heart, really, and a lot of creativity, a lot of Nintendo energy in these games. It Takes Two had a lot of that in its DNA, and I would say Split Fiction carries that forward in some key ways. So, we're about 3 hours in so far, so not done a huge amount. But Bally, what are your initial thoughts on Split Fiction?
Very strong so far. We're about halfway through, I think, the second level. I think the highlight for me at least so far, is some of those side levels. They're very fast to just jump in and out of, and I think that combined with some of the abilities in the second level that I don't really want to spoil, although they have been in trailers, is those are my two highlights so far. I think most of the first level was strong, but when we're talking about this while playing, but like when you're coming off of It Takes Two, and we played It Takes Two, maybe some of that like jumping around cooperative stuff is a little less impactful, and it's really the areas where there's either been incredible spectacle or there's been really cool abilities that have really shone the most so far. I feel like the threshold to impress us has been raised a bit, and I think there's only aspects of the first 3 hours that have done that.
Yeah, it's the ultimate Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom debate, which is impact versus polish and
Galaxy 1, Galaxy 2, Ori and the Blind Forest, Will of the Wisps, like
for sure. Yeah. So it's a classic sequel problem. I think it's less of a problem here in sequel nature because it is a completely different universe and different characters and different theme and aesthetic, but this game is It Takes Two too, basically, right? Like, definitely. I would say this is the most iterative Haze-like game up to this point, because I felt like A Way Out and Brothers stood quite differently and alone from It Takes Two, and I think all three of those games are quite distinct. Split Fiction does feel like a sequel to It Takes Two in everything but name and everything else surrounding it. So so it's very much a similar idea. The two of you are playing these different characters. One of them is a fantasy writer, one of them is a science fiction writer, and the setup is they go to this place, this publisher, who are going to supposedly publish their books, but then they're actually evil and they're actually going to steal all their ideas, and it's an AI analogy essentially of like, oh, we're going to take your brain and we're going to put your ideas into a machine and we're going to spit out stories essentially. And that's kind of what it's talking about. I think quite clearly, we talked about this previously, but I will say Hazelight's weakness is narrative. They, generally speaking, I think they just don't understand what makes a good story in any way whatsoever. I think they don't know how to write characters. I think the dialogue is wooden and badly written and
quite
very
tropey as well.
Extremely tropey and obvious, and it feels like it's built for children, but I would also call that an insult to children, I think there's a level of quality that most video games can hit, and I don't think this even hits that, right? I think it is so awful and so bad that I don't really care if we're having a chat over the top of it, because to me it's almost white noise in the background, because I know nothing the characters say matters at all, or that any development is going to happen, or that there's going to be any significant story beats that I'm ever going to care about. you almost know the entire ending of this game, the beginning, when you first play it, right? Like, and it's probably not going to change from that. So yeah, that sucks. But I think the nice thing about video games is it also doesn't matter as long as like mechanically you're having a good time, and I'm having a great time.
Yeah,
I'm having a great time with all the weird power-ups and levels, and like you said, the side stories are this nice kind of injection of freshness, because the levels are quite long. Like you're generally doing the same thing in terms of, if you have a certain ability that you're transforming with, you're going to use that for the whole level, and they will change it up. Every segment will be unique and different, but you'll still fundamentally be in that aesthetic, that area. And the side things are little like 10 to 15 minute tangents where you enter a completely visually distinct area, different mechanics, different everything, and it gets them the ability to flex and do weird gameplay styles that are just very fun and very, very kind of out there.
Yeah,
so.
Jump in, do a cool idea, jump out again, and repeat the idea in the same way that, as you say, the abilities per the main levels, you're using that same ability for kind of an hour and 15 minutes sometimes per level, and it is quite long. Just very quickly on the writing, I think we agree that Brothers has a good narrative, and then
yes,
I think
the one good story that Joseph Fares has ever told is the one where he didn't write any dialogue, which I think says a lot.
And then I think I know I enjoyed the writing and the story a lot more in A Way Out than you did, MBZ, but I still think it's got like a decent hamminess. The tropes work a lot better in A Way Out.
I think the schlock works because it's a dumb action movie, right? Like, and dumb action movies are supposed to be like that, and so I think he gets away with it in that game just because it's supposed to be a little stupid and like hammy.
And then I thought It Takes Two was fine. I was really not like, I didn't think the story was that great. I thought the beat to beat writing was actually stronger than Split Fiction so far, in some way. I don't know whether that's...
I agree. Yeah, Split Fiction's writing it's just awful. It's agonizingly bad, to the point where, like, I don't think you don't usually point this stuff out.
Well,
but
exactly.
You constantly are pointing out how terrible this dialogue is, and I'm not.
And I didn't do that with It Takes Two. I was disappointed. I was okay with the beat to beat writing of It Takes Two. I think where the narrative goes and characters like Dr. Hakim are pretty awful. Like, I really was disappointed in the final act of It Takes Two. I thought the final act of A Way Out was awesome. Like, I loved that. Whereas I thought the final act of It Takes Two was like, I don't know. There's no evolution in the way I was hoping for. But then hearing all the reviewers talk about Split Fiction being a bit flatter, I was like, I don't know. And then going into it, it's just hit me like a ton of bricks, like how flat and tropey, and it's the American versus the British thing. There's something about that relationship that just grinds me the wrong way. I don't know how to describe it, but
yes, I think we made a joke early on of like, every single thing they're going to be at odds with in this game. It's like, I do this and you do that, and I made the joke of like, I'm the country mouse, I'm the town mouse, and not an hour later they talked about like being from the country, being from the city, and I was like, fuck me, man. if I'm like predicting like the corniness of this is not on a good track. Yeah,
and it is a shame, because I think that yes, this game is awesome so far. I'm confident we're going to have a great time. I'm confident this game will feature for both of us pretty high up in our Game of the Year lists. But I think the expectation when you're doing such a chatty, third-person, heavy cutscene game in the year 2025, I think, the Sony narrative-driven game has resulted in people expecting more. When you include a lot of cutscenes in a 3D game, the expectation in 2025 is for a lot of story. Whether that's fair or not, I think that has become the expectation, because there's lots of games that come out, maybe Metroidvanias are a famous example, where the expectation on story is so much lower, rightly or wrongly, but those games generally have fewer cutscenes. When they do have cutscenes, like in Ori and the Blind Forest, they're shorter, they've not got dialogue, they're more punchy in some ways, whereas It Takes Two, Split Fiction, they're going for something that is not trying to be like The Last of Us, but it's trying to be, in terms of like, we've done the motion capture, we've invested the budget, like the budget almost links to the narrative.
I mean, Fares is a huge Naughty Dog fan, right? Like, he looks up to and respects Druckmann's work, and like feels like he's trying to do a similar thing, which is ironic, because like the thing that he's the best at, and I think the studio is the best at, is everything not to do with narrative.
Gameplay, action mechanics, and not the narrative. It's wild.
It's the creativity of like things that you do and how weird they can get and how like off the wall. Like there's multiple segments of gameplay where we're like, excuse me, we're doing what, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd said before Split Fiction came out, I was like, you know, I've seen all his tricks. You know, I always go back to, I was Grass. You know, I played as Grass in It Takes Two. This man can't surprise me anymore. And I'll say that I've been surprised by some stuff. Some of the stuff
There's already a couple where we've been like, wow, that's really cool. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like the stuff that also, when you play it, like, we almost expected they built it for people to, like, fuck up with it and, like, laugh about it. Like,
yes.
I think about the Spike
really
situation.
Slapstick, really
yeah, there was a
hilarious.
Spike situation we were in where, like, I had control over some stuff and Bali was trying to navigate and I just, like, did a thing and we both just lost it laughing because it was like, oh my god, I didn't mean to do that, now we have to redo it. Very funny things going on there that is just very delightful to engage with. And I think, like, for me, the first hour or so was a bit of a drag in sections because, like you said, it's the kind of impact, the newness of like, ooh, we're platforming together and running away from this stuff is lessened having done It Takes Two.
Definitely. And that is that's very similar to the intro level of It Takes Two, is you are both running and platforming together through a very similar level, and that's kind of the first level of Split Fiction.
Yeah, because they have to get you used to the base mechanics of the game, which is you have a double jump, you have an air dash, right? And so all the stuff is going to be built around making you climb poles with the dash and then, you know, using your platforming skill to get across places.
Yeah, because as cool as some of the boss fights have been so far, I've had way more fun in the slower, more methodical, puzzly things, and I think that's hit me a bit harder so far, at least.
Yeah, I think because, the creativity is starting to show itself. And I think also part of this is I did see a decent amount of preview coverage for this game and there was trailers everywhere and like I knew some of the stuff going in. I think we've just gotten to the point now where we're past all of that. So we've seen,
it's a lot fresher,
you know, everything in game that has been advertised, and so now everything is going to be a lot fresher and more interesting going forward, basically, which is exciting because, you know, we're only a few hours in. I think this game's supposed to be 14 or something, so it's a beefy game. It's going to be a lot of stuff going on.
It Takes Two was 8-9 levels or something.
Yeah,
and they were like an hour and a half, hour 15 each as well. So imagine a similar structure.
Yeah, for sure. So really looking forward to playing the rest of this. Again, you know, I'm not going to say that we're going to skip cutscenes because it's not what we do. I'll just sit through them and, you know, make snide comments, but I have no hopes for this story, and going by reviews, I think that they agreed, seemingly.
Yeah, so. The snide comments is fun to do together.
It's something I think we mentioned before, but like I like the fact that this game allows you for any player to pause it.
It's
so like
very seamless and quick and easy.
Yeah. So either person can pause it and then you can just have a chat and then unpause it. Yeah, exactly. Have a dunk on it, and then I did that a lot during It Takes Two, and I think, you know, Split Fiction will be doing more of that, which is good fun. So if nothing else, the bad writing provides us, you know, some good opportunities to have a laugh anyway about it. So, you know, there's a function there also in its purpose. So great. Well, we will, like we said, probably be talking about that on our Nintendo show in more depth. So look out for that on Patreon, and we'll be talking about it there. Bali, there's another video game that you have been playing quite a bit of. I have been playing some of as well, so I can speak to it. But what's been going on? Yeah,
I'm about 8 to 9 hours into Nine Souls. It's, you know, it's a good sign when we played a Taiwanese game before in Eastward, and it was very good.
Yes.
And this is another Taiwanese game in Nine Souls, and so far it is also very good. So Taiwanese games for the win at the moment. I'm finding this game very tough, but very impressive so far. It's very tough in a kind of Hollow Knight Soulsy kind of way.
I guess to set up what Nine Souls is, right? It is a Metroidvania in the vein of a Sekiro, I would say, which is to say very focused around parrying as a mechanic.
This is multiple types of parries. It's insane how much tech there is in this 2D fighting style.
Right.
It's
I would say, like, if Hollow Knight was Dark Souls, then Nine Souls is Sekiro, basically, if we're doing the Souls to Metroidvania analogies, essentially. So
And I think a lot of the difficulty comes from just very tough enemies. Sometimes it can feel a little bit long between save points, or sites of grace, as they call them, like Elden Ring, that kind of thing, because you do more than just save at those points. You can improve your skill tree, you can spend your money, you can do other things. But similar to Hollow Knight, it's that painful thing of when you die, you don't just lose all your experience for like that level that you're on, you also lose all your money. And I found that when I reached the second boss and I eventually beat it, I think I need to have a word for when, the phrase I can only call it is when Bally faced Ridley and Super Metroided himself.
Yes.
And what I mean by this is, so for those who don't know, I played Super Metroid back in around 2014, and I got to Ridley and I had a really hard time. And I think I was saying to you, why am I having such a hard time? He's like, I don't know, Bally, what are you doing wrong? And I realized that I had barely found any energy tanks.
Yeah, I was like, how much health do you have? And you're like, I've got 3 energy. And I'm like, 3? What the fuck? I was like, obviously you're gonna die. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but eventually I beat Ridley with 3 energy or 4 energy tanks, or however many it was, and that was just stupid. And I think I might have done similar to myself with the second boss. I found the second boss quite difficult, kept resetting, but I eventually beat the second boss. But it wasn't until after the second boss I upgraded my health. You can boost, you use like a pipe in this game, which is very cool and very East Asian. Like, you've got this cool pipe that you smoke to gain health, and then you can also you can improve the number of pipes you have, but you can also improve the strength of the pipe, so how much health you'll get back. So after defeating the second boss, I worked out how you get, it's quite hard to kind of work out how to get more health and boost your pipe and get the number of pipes. They're all 3 separate things that you'll have to work out how to get them all. I had to look a bit of that stuff up.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I did that recently. So I'm partway through that area before the second boss, and I've already got 3 breaths of my pipe available, as well as health upgraded and a bunch of other stuff. So
nice.
Yeah, that's hopefully put me in better stead than you for the second boss.
It's still pretty tough. I think what's really cool as well is the difference between the first boss and the second boss could not be more stark. So the first boss, without spoiling things too much, is constantly parrying. Like, the best way to beat that boss is parry. Now you've got 2 types of parry, or at least I've got 2 types so far. You've got your standard parry, but even the standard parry in this game is very complicated, because standard parry builds up these spheres, and you can use the spheres to essentially dash through an enemy. They will flinch as you dash through them, and then you can throw the sphere back at them by holding like R2, R1, or whatever it is on Steam Deck. You can build up multiple parries, multiple spheres, then dash to the enemy, and then attack the enemy.
Expend them all at once, basically.
Expend them all at once. And the ability, similar to Hollow Knight and like Ori Will of the Wisps, you've got like, as it were, pins. I can't remember what they're called in this game. And the one that I'm using gives you it makes the enemy flinch a little longer when you do that dash through them.
Ah, right. Okay.
Which I'm finding quite useful, especially on bosses and bigger enemies. So that's one. That whole thing I've just described is one type of parry.
Right.
And then the other type of parry is some enemies do an attack that is unparryable because it's red, but the enemy will glow green. So that means that you can't parry the original red attack, but you can jump and parry the enemy themselves. So you basically jump and then use the parry button, like L1, into the enemy, and that will make them flinch, and then you'll land and you can slash away at them a bit. So there's these 2 types of parry that are kind of like different sides of the same coin, where one is defending or parrying the actual main attacks, and the other one is saying, no, we're going to dodge the attack entirely, jump on you, and then parry the enemy itself. And I found that first boss just really satisfying, where, first few attempts you die instantly. You're like, I need to quit this game. I can't beat the first boss. I can't even survive more than 5 seconds against the first boss, let alone and then slowly but gradually, it must have taken me, I don't know, half an hour, 35, 40 minutes. Eventually you work out, right, no, this is the parry system. This is the timing. Boom, boom, boom. Here we go. Duh, duh, duh. And I've not played Sekiro, so I've not played a ton of games with a ton of parrying, but I found it incredibly satisfying. And then that is I don't think you've not faced the second boss yet. But
Not yet, no.
I'll just say the second boss, I used the complete opposite strategy.
Huh.
I unlocked a weapon or an attack that doesn't involve parrying, and I just used that. I just dodged and used that move, dodged, used that move, dodged, used that move.
Wow.
I didn't do any parrying, and that was how I felt was the best way to defeat the second boss. I've gotten to the third boss, and then I faced the third boss. It was quite late at night. I faced it once. I died. And I was like, right, I'm gonna play some Split Fiction with MZ, and I'm gonna come back to this in a while. But so far, those boss fights are just incredibly impressive. I'm blown away by the mechanics of this game. It's very tough, but it's done so elegantly and so stylishly that I want more. And I think the thing that is really propping all of this up even further, and we just mentioned this talking about Split Fiction, but Metroidvanias aren't really a genre that's famous for narratives. Now, I think games like Blind Forest, Will of the Wisps, Metroid Dread, I think they've all got strong stories, strong narratives in terms of beats, and I think they
little moments, right?
Great moments, awesome moments that often link to bosses and enemies and other ways. I think that Nine Souls has quite a strong story, even from like a traditional video game story narrative perspective. The game at the start is actually quite talky, but if you
very slow, yes, and you're like not being able to do any kind of combat stuff. You're walking through a village, you're like listening to people talk.
And it's like, this feels weird for this type of game. It feels more like a 3D game, but I am loving the narrative and how dark this world is so far. Like, it's like, I love the Ori games because those forests and that environment is just so beautiful, so stunning. This game, you're in a lot of like factories and not nice places to be. There's some nicer places, but it's a very dark game in comparison, and it kind of feels a lot like Hollow Knight in many ways, including in that way.
Yeah, it's kind of a blend of like future tech with like a more traditional kind of
East Asian
inspired like setting.
Definitely.
But like the idea is that you have these villagers up top. They're called ape men. They're basically humans essentially, right? And the character that you're from a clan. I can't remember the name of the race that you are, but basically,
they are personified cats.
Yes, essentially they're cats, they're animals, and like they call the ape men the hairless ones, right? Like they refer to them in a way that's like, oh, that's weird. You don't have all hair over your body, and all the rest of the creatures and the characters you meet are animals of some kind, anthropomorphized animals, and they like knew the height of technology. They had like a whole civilization, and then everything fell. Like there's actually quite a bit of kind of backstory and lore that they convey through this stuff. And then I think part of like some of the story beats is quite cool. They use like a comic book style panel, almost like a manga style panel as well, to relay some of those.
So much style, so much style. It's really, I think the story is really intriguing, and it's one of my favorite Metroidvania stories for sure, so far at least. Like, I'm really intrigued, and every boss I've fought, they have their own backstory, and you hear about that, and I think all that stuff is told really well so far. So I am, like I said, I should be, considering I've played like 8-9 hours, I should be way further than I am. I think because of the Bally Ridley myself situation, what I was finding was I was like dying, losing all my money, losing all my experience, and just playing on. And then I kept playing on. And then I realized, wait, I've not really upgraded anything. So
yeah, that makes sense.
There have been points where I've kind of got close to getting that level up, and then I've been like, right, I'm just going to stay near this site of grace, go and fight a few enemies, come back, go and fight a few enemies, come back, and do a little bit of grinding, let's call it. And stick a podcast in, go and do that. And it just makes me feel a bit stronger, a bit better about proceeding, because otherwise I feel like I'm going to get caught out badly by some of the tougher enemies in this game and the tougher bosses like I've been talking about. So I've done that a bit.
It also seems like the game's a little more forgiving than a Hollow Knight in that, in a traditional Dark Souls game, when you die, if you don't get back to your souls again, they're gone forever. You just lose them all. Whereas here, I've died multiple times not getting back to it, and when I do get back to it, I still recover a certain percentage of my my level up experience.
I don't think you get the money back though.
Maybe not. Maybe the money goes, but you definitely get back a percentage of your level up. So
the tricky thing about the money is that for your first pipe upgrade, it's like 500. For your next one, it's 1,000. For your next one, there's 2,000. For the one after that, it's 4,000. And you're like,
right.
So there are things similar to Elden Ring, actually, where it's almost like captured money. Like you can't lose it. So like you can recycle it and it becomes money.
Right, you keep it in your inventory and
exactly.
It's like, this is worth 4,000 or whatever, and you just want to save that until you can pop it at your home base and then use it to buy stuff.
So I just think this game is really elegant so far. And like its game design, the narrative, the mechanics, like it's expertly crafted so far. I am very, 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 very impressed. And yeah, I really wish I'd gotten to this game last year, but obviously like just busy. It's always a busy year of game releases, but I'm glad I've gotten to it this year. And I was waiting for this game to go on sale, and then I was like, screw this, I've got a window to play this game. I'm just going to pay 25 quid and play this on Steam Deck because I want to play this game, and I've not done that in a long time for an indie game that hasn't come out in the same year, you know.
Right.
So yeah, I'm impressed. Are you on the similar? Do you have similar opinion, MBZ, to what I've said?
I'm very much echoing your thoughts and on your wavelength with this one.
I didn't want to hype it up too much to you because I've done this a few times with games recently, and it's all about expectation management. I just wanted to say, like, this is where I am. I don't want to say too much, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I booted up as well. It's on Game Pass, so it's very easy for me to just check it out. And I was intending to play it anyway because I'd heard so many good things about it. Obviously, Metroidvania is my favorite genre. And like, you know, this happens sometimes where you are playing a game and you're just kind of playing it. And some games you're just like, man, I can't put this down, right? Like I really have felt that with Nine Souls so far. And part of it is the Metroidvania draw, which I always find it hard to put Metroidvanias down. But like, I just really, when you're locked in and you're like, okay, I want to get further. I want to, you know, keep exploring this space, see what's happening, and then getting to that first boss and being like, oh boy, this is a bit of a gut check, right? And you're just like, oh wow, okay, this is going, I'm getting there, I'm learning the parries, and like, yes, I kill it. Phase 2. fuck. Like, and then the kind of like the real just raw emotion that hits you when you realize, oh, I'm not done. Oh, every time I die, I'm gonna have to.
I was like, I am never gonna beat this game.
Exactly. I was like, I have to go through phase 1 again every time. But then you get to that point of like pure, just. You are so locked in, right?
You're just not. You don't lose any health on that first phase. You're like, how on earth have I gotten to this place?
And you just feel like an absolute ninja. Like I got to this point with the first phase where I was beating it in 15 seconds flat because what I was doing was I was attacking with my blade while parries were happening. So I was almost like a rhythm game, counting it out. Like I can get in 2 hits between these 2 parries. So it was like parry, slice, parry, dodge through the back of it. Like you feel electric when you pull that stuff off, and you just see the health just eroding. And I eventually got to the point where I was just decimating that first form, and then the second one I was like, okay, just need to remember and learn its tells. And I think the game is really good at giving you a good wind up for attacks and like animations to know this is one that I can parry, this is one that I can air parry, this is one that I can dash through, this is one that I should stay away from. Like the game does a really good job with that while still feeling fast enough to where it can catch you off guard sometimes, and so you do have to really be paying attention to it. But I felt like it was so satisfying going through that experience, and I think, you know, this is why people love the Souls games. It's because you learn something and you practice at it and you get better and better, and eventually you download it and you execute and it feels excellent. And, you know, even when I finished it, I still was like, a little bit of health left, like not that much. The health is also really interesting in this game in that if you don't parry properly, you basically take what's called a wound.
Just an imperfect parry.
Yes, yeah, not a perfect one, but an imperfect one. You take damage that isn't sustained until you get fully hit, and that damage slowly heals up over time. And what I noticed was, you know, sometimes I can get frustrated with bosses because I'm like, they have this long intro animation, I have to wait through that. And to some degree, this has that of like, okay, the first boss is like, okay, it's an animation, then we get into it. Part of that, I think, is just resetting the player of like, okay, we'll give them a bit of a breather to between sessions, they can just like kind of reset themselves. Then between phases, phase 1 and phase 2, there's an even longer animation. The enemy jumps to the background, like does this whole thing, and you're kind of sitting there being like, what's the point of that? And I realized that at one point I had got a wound and it had taken me all the way down to low, and as the boss jumped away, my health slowly was filling back up from the wound. So that middle stage of the boss giving me a break in phase 1 and phase 2 essentially acted as a way for my health to regen itself back to full as the wound was kind of being healed, essentially.
Wow.
So even that felt like it was an intentional part of the design, which I thought was very, very
I've unlocked an ability that while a wound is being healed, if you perfect parry, it will heal faster.
I just got that one as well.
Right,
I just
yeah.
added that to my my badge or whatever it's called,
nice,
right?
yeah.
So that stuff is incredibly satisfying. And I don't know how you feel about this so far, but to me it feels a little less Metroidvania-y in its exploration. It feels more linear, more directed, more combat focused, and a
lot less focused on platforming.
Yes.
I do think that's gradually changing for me. I would say a lot of the early battles you're fighting on the ground, and you can't jump and dash, and then so you're forced to dash along the ground through enemies, as it were, and fight them in the back, kind of thing. So it does feel very grounded and combat focused. I can see there's more platform. I've gotten to more platforming parts. It's nothing drastic. I think a game like Hollow Knight has way more platforming, especially 8 hours in, let's say. But this game feels a lot more kind of slower paced, linear, kind of this. I feel like the narrative plays into that a bit as well.
Yes, definitely.
And then, but equally, there's as linear as it is, there's kind of, to get to the third boss, it is quite open. There's multiple ways. It kind of feels like there's multiple ways to get there. I think in reality, you are just getting there one way. But it feels a bit more open, certainly, than the second boss. But
yeah, it feels like the design is built around this hub area where you go back there and there's NPCs that you can talk to and things that you can upgrade and all that sort of stuff. And from that hub area, when you walk outside of it, there's kind of like 4 different spokes to it where you can go off in one direction to one area, another direction.
But there's no fast travel. You can only fast travel between your last node and your home, the pavilion.
Yes, at least at the moment. It might be later on that you can fast travel between
I imagine
points,
so. But it makes it quite brutal at times.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it's gorgeous. This game is stunning in terms of its art design and its characters and its world, and music is really good as well. Like, I think it's just top to bottom, just an extremely polished experience, and it feels different, I think, from games like Hollow Knight, but there's definitely an identity shared, but it feels so its own thing and its own priorities, and kind of like, doing different stuff that is super unique and very interesting and much more combat focused, generally speaking. This is one of the most combat focused Metroidvanias I've played, and I think it's extremely unforgiving as well in terms of regular enemies. Like, I constantly die to regular enemies just from a mistimed parry, Like, that stuff is happening constantly.
That feeling of like, oh, I'm just going to run around this area of the map I've already been to in order to just grind a bit of XP or grind a bit of money. That's not a lighthearted, oh, let's just do that and kill loads of enemies. That's like you need to practice on those enemies just to keep beating them again and again. Otherwise, one wrong move and you're dead pretty quick, especially before upgrading your health, which is, there's a few more hoops you have to jump through to upgrade health in this game. It's not that simple, so and it's quite costly. So I think that it adds to how severe and brutal this game is, especially early on, I think.
It definitely has a bit of Castlevania about it, in the sense that I find with Castlevania Metroidvania games, you tend to, the goal is always, can I get through to this next checkpoint without dying, basically. And there's a section here, like in that second area, where they start throwing new enemies at you with like swords that are quite quick, and you have quite a few of those back to back, and it's almost a boss unto itself. It's like a gauntlet of like, okay, I'm gonna fight this enemy who's got this like throwing star and this quick stuff. Then
there are also like random mini bosses dropped in, like Elden Ring, just around the map.
Okay, interesting.
I've been killed by a lot of those.
Yeah, there's definitely like the big guys who like do the thing on the ground that turns the like black red color that is like hard to avoid, and that sort of stuff is pretty tricky. But yeah, those kind of like sequences of, okay, I need to kill this guy, survive, then get to the next node that I can find so I can like refresh myself and rest up and, you know, get back to where I was before. Yeah, it can be very intense, but yeah, just very satisfying. Again, I'm not too far. I'm about 3-ish hours in, I would say. So I'm getting close to the second boss at this point in time. And
yeah, I'm going to beat this game about 50 hours, and you're going to be about 25. And
I think
can see it a mile off.
I think 2022 is what how long to beat has for regular playthroughs. So
I think 27 plus is the plus extra, and I'm always a little bit more than the plus extra. Is kind of where I see it, and like without spoilers, but yeah. 9 souls, you know, that's the kind of length.
There's 9, yeah, there's probably going to be like 9 major bosses is my guess, right? They set that up from the beginning of like
a cat
the
has
structure.
9 lives.
Yes, totally. Yeah. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and yeah, if you're a third of the way through 8 hours, you're definitely going for at least 30, I think, with this one.
Exactly.
So, but that's great. Honestly, I think that's fine, because part of the joy is like just going through the ringer of these fights, and just no matter how long it takes, like you're gonna get there eventually.
Yeah, and I feel like I can go away and grind and level up a bit if I need to, you know. And when I say levels, I just mean upgrades. It's not formally levels in that sense, but
yeah, just giving you a bit more survivability somehow through whatever thing that you need there. And you know, you can mess around with the different pins and you know, that kind of badge system to give you different things for different boss fights, whatever makes most sense. So yeah, very, very cool game that I am excited to play more of. There's so many big games right now that we're playing, and not enough time.
We'll probably end up talking about these games for a while because they take a while to
yeah, for sure. So anyway, that's our first kind of thoughts on 9 Souls. One more video game before we got out of this section, Bally, is a game that I played. It's called The Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood. Over Christmas, over the summer, sorry, not the summer, Christmas, summer, 2 different opposite sides of the spectrum. The winter sale on Steam, I picked up a bunch of different video games, because I was like, oh, I should just buy myself stuff, because, you know, it's my birthday and it's Christmas, and all we get these days is money, you know. No one buys anyone presents anymore, so I'm just like, well,
damn money.
I might as well take £100 and just spend it on a bunch of Steam games, and that's what I did. And so one of them was Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood, which is a game published by Devolver Digital, developed by Deconstruct Team, who had previously made a game called Red Strings Club, which was a kind of a narrative style game about a bar, I want to say. But this one piqued my interest because it has a bit of like magic kind of witch stuff in it, but also like card tarot reading, and it had a very distinct art style, overwhelmingly positive on Steam. People really love it, and so I was kind of interested, like, what was this going to be? Was it going to have some kind of deck building component to it, or was it going to be something different? What it turns out is that Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood is a very narrative focused game. It is a almost visual novel in a sense. I would compare it to something like Coffee Talk, which is a game where, you know, customers come in and, you know, you make coffee for them, but really it's about the conversations that happen. And the setup for this game is really interesting. Essentially, the idea is that out in space, there are a bunch of witches who live out in space. And so sometimes, you know, people from Earth, they can become elevated, ascended to become witches, in which case they leave Earth and they just become witches out in the cosmos. And witches basically live forever, and they live in these sisterhoods on these different places, and they can like interfere with stuff. They can interfere with Earth and its affairs and all that sort of thing. And there's also different races across the galaxy, basically. And the setup is that your character, Fortuna, she has been exiled from her coven. So she was a kind of fortune teller, and she basically predicted the fall of her coven. And so the head of that group exiled her for 1,000 years. And so we find her in this like small house, basically floating in space. And it's tiny. It's like one bed downstairs and like an upstairs that has a kitchen and a little table. And yeah, it's essentially a tiny little apartment that she lives on in the middle of nowhere. And you come to her 200 years into her exile, essentially. So she's been alone, talked to nobody for 200 years. So there's a certain mental state that you're in at that point in time. And she decides, screw this, I'm going to summon a behemoth. And a behemoth is like basically I don't know, some kind of like devil entity, and you're usually forbidden from summoning them, but she was taught by her previous master how to do it, just in case she ever needed to. And so she summons this behemoth, and this behemoth comes, and it's like, great, I can do stuff for you, basically like a genie, but I'm going to exact a price for it. And so you, at the very beginning of this game, you make like 4 fundamental choices about what's going to happen. And you don't know anything yet. You don't know much about your character. You don't know what's going to happen, but you make these important choices right at the beginning. And you do that, and then over the course of the game, as you get to know people, as things happen, you start to have that inevitability of, oh God, I made this choice at the start of the game, and this is going to happen because I'm tied to this entity, this behemoth.
Oh, jeez.
This thing's going to happen.
That
so
is
you've
interesting
made
game design, isn't it?
really interesting. Yeah. So like you almost like make these choices on a whim at the start. You're like, oh, I'll choose that and that. And then over time, you're like, oh no, this starts to become meaningful because now I care about this person. I care about this person. Oh no, I made that choice at the start, and things are going to change as a result, which I find is really fascinating. And it's a really interesting game structurally because it starts with this whole kind of behemoth stuff, and every day you're talking to the behemoth. You are deciding on a thing you're going to do for this deal you're making, and you're making these tarot cards essentially. And so half the game is visual novel narrative, where people are coming to your hut and they're talking to you, and then the other part is creating cards. So you are given a set of like stickers essentially, and so you use like magic points. So okay, let me break down how this works. So when you talk to a person, you make choices with them, and through those choices you will get these kind of magic points into air, earth, fire, wind. I think no, wind and air are the same. Earth, air, water, fire. That makes sense. Yeah. So 4 elemental kind of magics, and you then get these little points in those different magics. And when you make a card, you choose the base of the card, you choose one set of stickers, and you choose another set of stickers. And so you choose these based on how much their magic cost is, and so you basically just create different cards using these different combinations. And each card is like a little piece of artwork you can put together. For the purpose of the game, you don't actually have to go in depth and do any artwork, but I really found myself connecting with the cards and the way that they looked, and like making something that looked nice and having that connect to the story and like what the meaning of the card was. And I don't know, there was kind of like a therapy to it of just like sitting there and just kind of doing the art of it, like putting it together, creating something weird, something strange. And essentially you do these tarot card readings with the cards that you have made. So you make these cards, and then people come to you and they're like, oh, please give me a tarot card reading of this situation that I want to deal with. And so you shuffle the cards, and you know, the more cards you make, the more options you'll inevitably have. And when you place a card down, you'll get multiple dialogue choices that will then affect what happens to that character going forward. And so it starts off with your friends coming to visit you and all this sort of stuff, and you're kind of learning this system of making the cards and predicting people's futures. And then they do an interesting thing, which is like they start going and showing you some backstory of your character, and you go back to Earth and you're like, oh, this is before she ascended and became a witch. And so that's when I was like, oh, this is starting to do some really interesting stuff narratively. And then, like, the back half of the game becomes this whole thing about the Witch's Coven and a political situation, and you end up basically entering a race to become, like, the political leader of the Coven. And that involves talking to factions and persuading people. And so this game feels like it's split into, like, these multiple chunks, all of them so interesting and weird and different. And I think it still feels very cohesive as, like, a narrative and just stuff that it's trying to say. Mechanically, just really unlike anything I've played before. Just a very interesting game that, yeah, feels super unique and unlike anything I've really played. So I very much would encourage people who are interested in narrative style games to check this out. It's very dialogue heavy, it's very character heavy, and I think the character writing is great. I think the characters are all interesting and different, and like there's multiple endings you can have, and part of that is dictated by your choices at the beginning. Part of that is dictated by your choices at the end, and like what factions you choose to align with and who you're pushing and what you're like. Part of this game is creating a political agenda. Like there's like 6 different points, and you're like, right, for this point for the Coven and ruling it, what is our stance going to be? Like, what's our stance going to be on dangerous curses? Like, are we going to ban them? Are we going to, educate people about them? Like, like you are literally making a political manifesto as part of this game for this Witch's Coven. and you're trying to counter that against 3 other candidates who you're kind of like competing against. Yeah, really fascinating. So I strongly recommend people check this out. It's available on Switch, and yeah, it only took me about 7 hours or so. Nice. So it's kind of a condensed.
Was that last year? Did you say?
Came out a while ago. It was 2023.
Okay.
So August 23 apparently. But yeah, I really loved it. I think it's a very interesting game that has a lot to say, and yeah, tackles loads of interesting topics, but also has a great mythology of its own, and just like what's going on with the world. And like it's really interesting because some witches ascend like in the 1960s, so like your character is from the 60s, and then there's another character who ascended in like the 1800s, and then there's another character who ascended in like the year 2070 or something, right? And so like these people join the witches kind of like entire thing, but some of them have been around for much longer than others. And so, you know, someone references like smartphones and stuff to Fortuna, your main character, and she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because she ascended before that happened on Earth, right? So there's this weird like I don't know, generational divide between them as well, even though like a lot of them have come from Earth, a lot of them have come from different planets, but there's still that kind of divide that happens, which I found very fascinating. So yeah, cool. Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood. Very, very good game. I would check it out if you are at all interested. So there you go. Lovely. Well, that is going to do us for the first part of today's show. We'll be back after this break to tackle some of your emails. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It is time for emails again. We always need more emails. It's, you know, there's always news happening, new stuff coming out, new things to be asking about. If you want to send an email into the show, please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. We also have a channel on our Discord server. It's called Emails. That is a very fun community to join. Although, did you see that news about Discord?
Yes, apparently that might be off our list now for choosing a new home, because yeah, that seems like they're going to be owned by somebody bad, and it's going to be terrible, as always happens with this stuff. So
I think it was Ben Hansen on MinMax maybe 2 years ago was just like, can you believe that a thing like Discord exists? He was basically like, it's too perfect for something that's free. We need to use it as much as we can while we can, because this isn't going to last forever.
Oh
basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a real shame, because I really do like our Discord community, and I want to. We'll see where we can move to if we have to move, but yeah. For now, join the Discord community, post in emails, and we'll answer them.
Absolutely.
Our first email this time is from B King from Sweden. B King, we want to apologize. We are answering this email a long time after it was sent.
Many months.
You'll see the context in the email, so I better get to it. In just a few weeks, on the 17th of August, me and my girlfriend of almost 10 years are getting married. Well, B King, congratulations. Hope it all went well. Here we are. He's got
like 7 kids now. You know, it's been 25
March
years.
2025, but hope it all went well last year. And he says, this is, of course, something that I've been looking forward to for a long time, since we've been planning this already since the end of 2022 when I proposed. The planning of said wedding with guests coming from multiple countries, combined with both of us recently starting new jobs, it is safe to say that we both also are having a stressful time at the moment. Yes, I feel that pain. Luckily, we both managed to get 3 weeks off around the time of our wedding, which of course largely will be filled up with the planning and preparing of the final details of our special day. In the midst of all of this, I'm hoping to find the time as well to play some games to help take my mind off things. I usually play games like Rocket League or something like Forza Horizon, something that feels comfortable and familiar to me that doesn't require my fullest attention. I've also thought of replaying Breath of the Wild just to get immersed in another world and reliving and rediscovering some of the beautiful moments of that game. I feel like it is kind of situational what type of game I'll play to relax and take my mind off things, but I mostly tend to go for games I've either already played a ton of or a game from a series I am very familiar with. What types of games do you tend to go for when trying to relax and take your mind off things? Greetings from Sweden, B-King.
Lovely, yes. Well, I hope you did in that kind of 3-week period manage to get some good games in. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I feel like in times of stress and that sort of thing, you can kind of go a couple of different ways with it. Either you just fully want something to immerse yourself in, to forget about everything, or you want something that's really easy to pick up and just, is not a big barrier to entry that you can just like not even think about. And then sometimes I just feel like not playing anything and it's more like consuming content around a thing I'm familiar with. So like obviously for me, I'm a big YouTube person, and so I often will go and find like, I don't know, a Xenoblade video to watch of like somebody either experiencing it for the first time or like somebody, doing an analysis video of it, or just like immersing myself in something that is familiar, and I just want to have that take my mind off of things, if you know what I mean. And I think like passive entertainment is always easier to do that stuff with than anything else, right? It's a thing that is less barrier to entry, but there's definitely experiences of games where I've gone to those instead. But Bally, do you have any like specific ones in mind when this comes up to you?
Over Christmas, I've not talked about this on the show, but Ballychew was unfortunately in hospital. He had RSV, which can be very serious in babies, but it's basically a respiratory virus. Essentially, like, Bally Jr. gave him a cold. Caroline and I had this cold, but then for Ballychew, it like hit him a lot harder. So he was like in hospital for 6 nights. And I was doing one of the night shifts, so Caroline was doing most of them. I did one. Shout outs to Caroline, who did like 5 nights in the hospital, and I only did 1. But the one that I was there, and it was quite stressful. And Ballychew's all fine now, so no one needs to worry about this. It's all good. But it was quite stressful, and I brought my Switch, and I thought, at the time I was on podcast paternity leave, and I was just like, what can I do that'll just take my mind off and just play something that's relaxing, but I want to progress something. And I chose Celeste, and I was like, I just want the hardest thing possible. And it was just, so I was playing B-sides of Celeste, and it was just incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging, but it really like relaxed me and took my mind off of everything massively. And I don't think I even had a podcast in or anything. I was just like focused on this game, and it like, people know from this podcast like how much MZ and I love Celeste, and just yes. I think that game in that moment just hit the right note of what I needed and wanted, and I think it made a big difference. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's interesting when we talk about relaxing and Celeste, because like it is a thing is, I don't actually think it's a stressful game. A lot of people would categorize it as that just because of the difficulty, but part of its appeal is it's a frictionless game, right? Yes. Like it's you can just do a challenge again and again, and your brain can lock into it, and you can just kind of block everything else out, right? Like it's a good game to get immersed into because there's such focus required, such like precision, that it's easy to have it take up all your attention. And there's certainly games where your mind can wander because there's less going on. And I think, I mean, we talked about Nine Souls. That's a game where your attention is so critical, and you have to really lock in to that sort of stuff and not, start thinking about other stuff. It's a good game for like, not letting your mind wander, which I guess is the kind of maybe a good purpose for a relaxing game like that. It's just, make sure that you are focused on that task and that thing in particular, which I think is definitely very good. I do think that like Pokemon as a series is always very easy to play for me as well. And I don't necessarily go back and play older Pokemon games, but I feel like it's always an easy one to play passively and have that as like a thing that you can do like while relaxing. Like a TV show and Pokemon at the same time is always a very relaxing thing to be doing. I think like for me, one that I ended up putting a lot of hours into as like I guess a distraction, but also just the timing of it was with Tears of the Kingdom, because Tears of the Kingdom came out around the time that my grandmother was quite sick, and we were supposed to like go to Japan that year, so that's why my Japan trip got cancelled, right? Because she was very unwell, and was close to passing away, and then ended up passing away like later that month. But Tears of the Kingdom came out that month, right? And my plan was like, oh, we're gonna go to Japan and play Tears of the Kingdom and stuff. But Tears of the Kingdom was just like a thing that I could just spend time in. That whole situation, right? That entire period of time was just, I can just wander for ages and ages. And, I talked about like how Tears of the Kingdom isn't as impactful for me overall, but I think it was a very important game to have at that time. And I think it's also a game that I put 100 hours into still. And I was like, how did I do that? But I think it was that period of time where I was just like, people just around the house and we're just sitting there, just kind of like waiting for stuff to happen. And yeah, I think it was a very good one to just get lost in, right? Like it's a very immersive experience, and so you're like, there's always something to think about, always something to do, always somewhere to explore, and so yeah, I was very much kind of like locked in with that as an experience the whole time through that process, and that was a good thing to have in a time like that. So I definitely appreciate Tears of the Kingdom for that sort of stuff, right? And I think Breath of the Wild is similar. There's kind of there's a sereneness to it, there's a relaxingness to it, because we've talked about this with Breath of the Wild before, but my memories of Breath of the Wild feel like I went to a place, Like it doesn't feel like a video game. It feels like a real memory of a place that I visited. And I think there's a certain immersion to that is very special. It's hard to kind of break from. So
definitely.
Yeah, I think both of those are really good examples of ones that kind of like help take my mind off things and just like fully immerse yourself into a world, I guess. So
yeah, I agree with open world games generally. There's some exceptions, I guess, but also when I'm gaming, I kind of need to keep up the beat to beat of gaming for the games I'm playing for the show to talk about. Otherwise, I fall behind. So that kind of feeling of, I'll just play something that doesn't progress, Like if I just said, because I have played quite a lot of like Forza Horizon and the Forza games, I agree with Beaking. Those are great go-to games that I like to. I'm just going to drive and I'm going to listen to a podcast. And it's one of the best games for that, whether it's Horizon or the motorsport games. I'm just going to do laps. I'm going to do... I'd even say the motorsport games are kind of stronger for relaxing in a weird way, because I'm just driving around the track. I don't have to think about where I'm going. I just go into a menu to just pick the next race. Whereas Horizon, you're driving around a bit to work out where to go next, which is relaxing. I'm talking about like minimal thinking required kind of gaming, and I think motorsport is slightly ahead of Horizon weirdly for that, because there's just no thinking and going from race to race, and I can just stick on a podcast and do that. But like I said, I don't do that as much as I would like to, because I'm not always subscribed to Game Pass. I've tried to stay on it for like lean amounts of time now, but also B, I'm trying to play games that I'm going to talk about on the show. And I will admit, I don't actually play a great deal of stressful games. There are obviously plenty of games I've played that are stressful, but I think generally speaking, most games, when I'm doing my gaming, it's quite relaxed. I find even like Nine Souls quite relaxing, because it's still a video game, and it's as tense as it is. There's part of me that is just still enjoying that escapism and relaxing in that moment, as tense as it is. A bit like Celeste, like I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's also, for me, like when I go to bed, I usually want to have something to play before I go to sleep, and so I have my Steam Deck by my bed, and I usually pull that out and kind of like go through
Get
things.
Out the horror games and.
Oh boy, I always find it difficult because I make bad decisions, obviously, and so I go to bed and it's like, it's like 10 past midnight, but I still pull out the Steam Deck and I'm like, yeah, but I could play 20 minutes or something, and nothing is 20 minutes these days is the problem.
Yeah.
I think like for me, that's why roguelikes have become actually something that I like picking up nowadays, because it fits that bill of, I could do 20 minutes of Spelunky before I go to sleep, right? Like I could try this thing out. I could UFO 50 is great for that. Like, doing UFO 50 before bed is the most of my time in that game, frankly. Like, I've been able to get a lot of time into it because it is a very low barrier to entry. Like, the games are small, they are very instant to get into, there's not a lot of fluff, and you can just kind of boot it up, get in there, play something, and not have to worry about it too much. I played so much Peggle. I've not talked about it on the show, I've not talked about it anywhere. I played 3 different Peggle games over the last month, or at the start of this year, like end of December, start of January. I played 3 Peggle games because it's the easiest thing on Steam Deck at night to be like, yeah, just put on a podcast, just fucking throw some pegs into this hole and just hit things and hit stuff, hit some balls with some pegs, and it's great. It's just very, very satisfying, kind of like brain rotty in a way, but like, I don't know, there's a satisfaction to just Peggle, just doing things and lights happening and colors, and yeah, it's a very low impact experience that helps relax me as well. And I think I also want to give a shout out to a game called The Ramp. The Ramp is like basically a little toy of a game. It's essentially a little skateboarding toy on Steam Deck, where there's no points, there's no timer, there's nothing. You just you and a skateboard, and you just do little tricks in the air, and you just go up and down on a half pipe. And yeah, you don't get anything for doing it. It's just, it feels good to move that skateboarder around, to do tricks, to land them properly, to get the momentum. There's like a swimming pool level there that I just go around again and again. I just spin in the air, and just the feeling of movement, right? And we always talk about how I am, number one movie boy, and this is kind of like that distilled for me. Is like, what do I want right before bed? I want a game where I don't have to think about anything. I can put on a podcast in the background, and I can just, my fingers can move and my brain can just be tickled by the idea of just, doing something in the game like that. So, yeah, those are my go-tos for bed. So I think the Vampire Survivors type games are good as well. I've been playing a bunch of Brotato recently, which is more of a wave-based version of Vampire Survivors. I've got like 4 or 5 hours in that, just playing it, 20 minutes every day before bed, basically. So, yeah, I'm always looking for low impact, relaxing stuff right before I go to sleep to just like, yeah, just have something there. So yeah, those are kind of my relaxing games in that sense as well.
Nice.
So depends on the situation, but yeah.
Thank you very much for your question, Beaking. And as we said, hope the wedding all went well. And our next email is from Justin from Pennsylvania. Says, salutations, gentlemen. I hope the both of you are enjoying this hiatus from the podcast. Well, like I said, we get to these emails.
Hey, we've got some old emails here.
Bally, congrats on the second child. Thank you very much, Justin. What are your favorite video game title screens or opening sequences? 5 come to mind for me. Number 1. Metroid Prime. The eerie sci-fi melody coupled with the microbiological imagery perfectly evokes the horror that awaits. That was some good English right there.
Yeah.
Number 2, Super Smash Bros. Melee. That intro video coupled with the orchestra in the background just blew me away. The graphical upgrade with Mario's denim or with Peach's waving gloved hand is just burned into my memory. Number 3, Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Stadium 2. These were not very impressive, but historically, what they represented at the time was tremendous. My team I raised from their first forms, whose growth I witnessed in the 8-bit landscape, were now transformed into fleshed-out 3D models. Just the teaser of seeing some of them brought to life in this build-up was groundbreaking. Number 4, Skyrim. Simple and beautiful, let that intro chorus just carry you into the harsh landscape filled with never-ending battles and magical intrigue. Goosebumps every time. Number 5, Ocarina of Time. The promise of freedom to ride a horse around an open landscape with a night and day cycle. It's subtle and is modest in its presentation despite the grand adventure that awaited. P.S. On behalf of America, I am so sorry for what my fellow citizens unleashed onto the world. Take pity on us. Justin from Pennsylvania. On that last point, I feel like a lot has happened in the whole American Trump thing since this email, so that is all very depressing, and I'm sure we'll podcast about it at some point.
Yeah. But let's talk about video game title screens. Yeah, there's quite a few iconic ones. I mean, the one I'm always going to say, Xenoblade Chronicles. What an iconic opening title screen. That blade in the field is seared into my mind. Like, the red on green, like, it is just, it's so iconic. It's ironic as well because, like, I feel like the game is well known, but it's not that well known. I think Xenoblade is actually most well known for its title screen more than anything else. There's a bunch of YouTube videos that are about title screens, and all of them use Xenoblade as their thumbnail. Every single one that's like best title screens in video games, the thumbnail they use is the Xenoblade 1 title screen. I think it's cool for a few reasons. I think it evokes that sense of the mechanical and the fantastical, right? It's like, here's this grassy open field with this blade stuck into it, this kind of like this thing that shouldn't be there, right? It feels kind of like at odds with each other. There's the color
like
contrast.
The one's biological, one's mechanical.
Exactly.
Into each other, yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
There's the color contrast with the red and the green. There's the fact that the title screen itself is evocative of the game, where the day changes, the time of day changes. The longer you wait on that screen, it goes through a day-night cycle through the entirety of the title screen, which I think is extremely cool. And obviously the music of Xenoblade is amazing, and there's a title screen song that is just built for the title screen itself. So yeah, it is one of the most iconic ones, the one that is, every time I think of a title screen, it's the one that first comes to my brain. And I think it's ironic these days. Like, title screens are a really interesting topic, because I do feel like in the Switch generation, in the Xbox kind of like, what do you call it, quick resume era, and even with stuff like Steam Deck, right, and just like getting back into your games, how often is it that we see title screens these days?
I know, it's become non-existent.
Essentially, yeah. Like, it used to be the case that you'd play a game, you'd turn off your system, and then turn it back on, see the title screen, get back into it. But like, when I play a PS5 game now, I just put it into sleep mode, and then I come back to it, and I'm straight back into the game, and I never return to the title screen again.
Yeah. I don't have any modern examples as a result. Like, all of mine are that kind of Wii, GameCube, N64 era, because that's...
Right.
That's the
because
nostalgia.
You see them so many times, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just a constant thing that happens.
There's no suspend mode. There's no quick resume. It's, you are booting up your N64 from on and off. There's an on and off switch, and that's it. That's how you do it. Yeah.
I do have one from this era, and it's a little bit to do with the opening as well. But 2018's God of War, I think, has an iconic title screen. The tree with the hand on it, and the fact that when you start the game, that is the shot that the game starts on.
Yeah,
it starts with Kratos.
Games have done that since. I can't think of examples, but there are some.
There's definitely some out there, but yeah, the fact that it starts with that image, and then the game starts with that as its opening shot, and you see Kratos come in and take the tree, take it down, put it on the boat, and like it's the entire premise of that game is the one shot of it.
Yeah.
And the fact that the title screen is the first shot in the one shot, I think is actually very, very cool.
Talk about impact game versus improving on a formula. I think 2018 and Ragnarok are a very good example, and I feel like the first 3 hours of 2018 that start with the tree scene you're talking about, it's so like that was very special for me personally, because that's like my first 3 hours of owning a PlayStation, owning a non-Nintendo console, and jumping into something. Playing God of War 2018 in 2018 with a brand new PlayStation 4 Slim, I guess it was at the time. And yeah, that you're right, that is a really impactful, memorable moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So that, for me, modern wise, that's the only one that kind of comes to mind, because, like you say, it's often that we just don't ever see them again, right?
That was 7 years ago. 7.
God, that's mad. Yeah.
One of mine is in line with a few of these. Pokemon Stadium and Super Smash Bros. Melee are very high up in my nostalgia brain. I would put alongside those two Pokemon Snap. I think you tested me in the jukebox a little while ago on the Pokemon Snap intro, and that theme tune just isn't like emblazoned in my brain. Like, I can't, like, that's just so at the front of my brain. I just know that tune and that feeling, and the like, you follow, I think he's called Tracy, and you follow him like is it Tracy? No, it's the other guy. Tracy's the guy in Orange Islands, but that you meet is he called, what's he called? I can't remember the name of the main dude in Pokemon Snap, but you meet him in the Orange Islands anime.
Yes.
But and he's like following around Mew, and then,
I'm pretty sure it's Tracy.
No, Tracy's the dude.
He's the photographer guy, right? No?
He is a photographer, but he's not the photographer.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's got
I
the
feel like
marrow.
Tracy was Orange Islands man, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
He is Orange Islands man.
Oh.
But Tracy and Orange Islands team meet the character from Pokemon Snap in the Orange Islands anime.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you mean the character you play as in Pokemon Snap?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I don't know who that is.
I
Yeah,
can't
no
remember his
idea.
name. But yeah, that intro, it hits me really hard. And it's like the river scene, and it's like Mew's jumping in between like the bushes, and there's something very nostalgic about just that very muddy, not great now looking kind of depiction of a river in a bush. It's just I love so much, and that's in stark contrast to it's not in engine, I guess it's like a fully rendered cutscene of like Super Smash Brothers Melee, and that music is so iconic, and the beats and the seeing Ridley fight Samus and like that. Yeah, that's a really special intro. Melee.
Yes.
In terms of opening screens, I also think Mario Sunshine and Mario Galaxy in particular are two from my childhood that I remember really distinctly. And I think that in Mario Sunshine, you like you like hit the block that of the save file that you want.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And then in Galaxy, you can pick a head, so you can have like
you choose
Mario's
the
head or
face.
Peach's head, Luigi's head, or even like a me head that represents your game save file from that opening screen. And yeah, the Mario games kind of similar to Zelda, that all their logos kind of look very similar, and it's the big Mario across the front, and then obviously there was something very magical about the first Galaxy game being in space, but that intro is just, I think what Mario Galaxy does amazingly well, and the intro is included in that, is they made space feel cozy. Like Rosalina, her reading to the Lumas, and that whole vibe is very like cozy fairy tale storybook thing. I think that they managed to make the main space station you're on feel like it's got like a red carpet, and there's like sofas and things, and like there's things that feel cozy and like a nighttime book versus the dark abyss of space. And I think they do that balance really well. I think that's echoed and represented nicely in the kind of intro screen. Yeah. Gotta do one more on my list, and then I think I'm done.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
We were too young for the Ocarina of Time to hit us hard. I mean, I obviously got that intro that hit us when we played the remake on the 3DS, but an intro that tries to kind of basically replicate that, and you can argue a lot of the game tries to replicate it overall, is Twilight Princess. And
this is on my list as well.
Yeah, definitely. That intro of riding Epona, and there's like a stark orange to it that is so memorable, and it just feels eerie in a way that Ocarina of Time doesn't.
There's also like, because we played it on Wii, there's the Wii channel of it all, which is you go into the channel and you click it, and the music of like going into Twilight Princess has its own kind of like iconic feeling to it as well.
It's like an intro screen before the intro screen.
Yes, yeah, exactly. The thing that really stands out in my mind about Twilight Princess's opening is the pressing A and B at the same time, and the sword sound coming out of the Wii speaker. Yeah, like that kind of, the sound design there is just so burned into my brain of every time I started up Twilight Princess, and then it goes into the do like fairy fountain music as you're choosing your file select.
And a lot of Zelda games have that as their file select screen, which is nice.
And I can hear the clunk of like when you're pointing the Wii remote at what file you want to do, right? Like, there's a lot of iconic shit with Twilight Princess, and part of it is that riffing on the Ocarina of Time, but it's so much darker, so much like grittier, and I don't know. There's the Bridge of Eldin, and just like riding across that is such a vast and expansive thing that just makes the game feel incredibly epic in that way.
Very cool.
Great. I have a couple as well. I think for me, Pokemon Gold and Silver is very iconic.
That's a good one.
Just seeing either Lugia or Ho-Oh kind of like fly across the screen, like the way that Lugia moves, the way that he just kind of like bobs up and down, it's like he's like rapidly like dashing through the sky essentially.
Just such incredible animation for like pixel art.
Yeah, and the fact that they reflect each other, so like the Lugia one is at night for Silver and the Ho-Oh one's at day for Gold, like I think those are really memorable, and just like I think every Pokemon screen has its own kind of vibe, but those were the ones that really stood out to me. And obviously the intro of Gold and Silver as well, like the animation of like you see the shelter on the ocean and like all the different stuff. It's a very cool kind of introduction to that game. And yeah, that one is one that obviously I saw a huge amount. The amount that we played Gold and Silver and Crystal back in the day was tremendous number of hours doing that. And obviously the Game Boy you had to boot up every single time, so you'd always see it constantly. So yeah, that one stood out greatly to me. I think Animal Crossing's a really interesting one as well, in that every time you boot up any Animal Crossing game, you see your town, essentially. And so every time that you come back to the game, it's like you
it's
are...
like God of War.
Yeah, but it's different in the way that like you are... you're experiencing it evolve in real time. So like, you know, when you first start Animal Crossing, it's just like a bare empty island, and then you're like slowly building it up. Oh, there's some more different things. There's my trees there now, and here's a villager who joined, who's walking around, and eventually by the end, it's like, oh my gosh, like I go into this town, and it's like, oh, they're just panning over all these buildings, especially with the new one. It's like, oh, you built everything outside. It's panning over the sushi restaurant I built, and like all this other stuff, you know. I think that has its own unique flavor in that the title screen is reflected of your progress in the game, and what you put into it is what you'll get out of it when it comes to the title screen. If you have a shitty island that looks bad, then you know you're going to be rewarded with that kind of like view of the island every single time you boot it up. It's not going to be aspirational, you know. It's not going to give you a title screen that shows like what your island could look like. It's going to show you what it does look like, and it's up to you what it does look like. So it's very much on the player with that one for sure. And I think that kind of goes back to I feel like Animal Crossing on DS with Wild World did the same thing, right? Like the title screen it shows you your town. So it's kind of a staple of the series, which I really like. I think that's a very good thing. And also, ironically, one of the modern day games where you do still see the title, because whenever, you know, even if my Switch was in sleep mode in Animal Crossing, it would always like reboot me essentially, because it's like, oh, now end of the day, you're in a new day now, let's kind of reboot you from the beginning almost. So yeah, interesting that it still kind of has that power. And yeah, an older one for a classic game that we played, that I guess because of save states we didn't end up seeing it that often, but I think the opening for Final Fantasy VI is extremely iconic. The mechs walking through the snow.
Oh my god,
obviously,
yes.
the opening movie is like a whole to-do, and it's like very long and extended, but then you get to the title screen and the music is so menacing. Like it's like, nah, nah. It has those like very kind of like discordant feeling notes, right? Like
it's like meant to be a pipe organ.
It's like a pipe organ,
yeah. Minor key, just like
blaring out and like almost like announcing Kafka, you know, like it has that kind of like feel to it, which is very, very particular tone that it strikes, I would say. So that one definitely stands out to me as well. Obviously Chrono Trigger is a very iconic one for a lot of people, with the like swinging of the clock. I think Chrono Cross has an excellent opening as well that a lot of people like. I'm surprised you haven't brought up The Last of Us, because I think that's also the window, right? The flowing kind of like the plant kind of like coming in, like the window just with the what do you call them, curtains kind of like slowly waving. Like it's very understated, it's very calm, and it's almost, I don't know, it's very the opposite to what the game ends up being. It's like, we're going to give you this piece of calm here before you get into the shit that you're going to end up doing.
Foreboding.
Yeah, very foreboding for sure. Yeah. There's loads of good ones. I'm sure there's plenty that we've forgotten and have not brought up, but it's very good. Witcher 3 has a pretty good one as well. I like Witcher 3's opening, where he's kind of like on the ground, like kneeling. That one's very, very nice as well. So yeah, there's a bunch. Super Metroid, iconic. That one's very iconic.
Yes.
For sure. Great. Well, thanks for the question. Appreciate it. I guess we didn't really talk about like openings of games, because it was kind of a question of like starts of games and title either or, basically. But I think like, you know, part of those we've already kind of discussed as well. So I think most of it is kind of tied together, you know.
Last of Us Part 1, strong opening.
Oh yeah, very strong. Yeah, one of the most iconic of all time, I'd say. So yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, I think that's going to do us. Molly, where could people send these emails if they want to get theirs? talked about on the show.
Please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And as I said at the top of the segment, we also have a channel on our Discord server. Join us over there.
Yes, please do. Obviously, you can go and follow us on the internet in various different places. You can find us on Spotify, on Stitcher, on any different downloadable place where podcasts live. Search for This Nintendo Life, download us, review us, all that good stuff. That would be great. If you would like more of this show, you can do so and get more by supporting us on a little website called Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, you can find extra additional content that we create, and then you can download it and listen to it however you like. So Bally, we'd like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK, Alan, Turtle, Orange Thunder, and Ali T. Thank you all for your $10 tier plus support, but also a huge thank you to all of our other patrons. We really, really appreciate all the support you give the show. Like I think we mentioned, we're going to be playing an awful lot more of Split Fiction, and we'll try and get a pod in before MEZ dashes off to San Francisco for GDC. So
Absolutely.
I don't know if we'll beat the game in time, but we'll have played a lot more, and we'll share some more thoughts and probably go a bit more in depth and a few spoilers here and there. So we'll hopefully cover that next weekend.
Yeah, I believe we have some new patrons as well.
Yes, thank you very much to Dustin W and Peter S. Thank you so much for your new patronage. Like I said, all the support anyone can give the show, we really, really, really appreciate it. It helps keep the show on the road.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the bucks to toss our way, then just feel free to go and tell some people about the show. That's the best way of helping it grow, by spreading the word. So if you enjoy it, that would be the best thing to do. Lovely. You can find us on various places on the internet. You can find me at LordNBZ or at NBZ on various social places. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. That's on Blue Sky and Twitter.
All right. You can also find TNL Podcast. That is the podcast social account as well. So at TNL Podcast, go search for us there. You'll get updates about the show and various things that are going on with it, as well as links to our Discord, our YouTube channel, all that good stuff. Join the Discord and chat with some folks over there. But then also, we're on YouTube also. So if you want to have us in a separate tab and listen to us while you're playing a video game, feel free to do that as well. Great. I think that is going to do us. We've got a lot of Split Fiction to be playing, Bally, and a lot of other stuff to be checking out in kind of lead up to the Switch 2 reveal that's happening at some point.
It's going to be big.
It's going to be big. So look forward to that. Until then, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back very soon with some more podcasting and some more Nintendo chat. Until then, goodbye. The musical interlude used on today's show was The Daggersmith from the Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood, copyright Deconstruct Team 2023.